we have reached the ending of The Rise of Skywalker novel. Okay, continuing on page 242, Poe and Finn have a brief conversation where they're a little worried that, the Emperor or his forces may actually try to come back again. But they decide this will not happen because so many from all over the galaxy came to take a stand together this time. What General Leia did with Solo and Skywalker was incredible, Finn explained, heroic and brave. But it was just one small group against incredible odds. Poe began to smile. We're not just one small group, he said, understanding. The Resistance is 1 million people, 1,000 places. General Leia united a whole galaxy. This time it's for real. Poe's grin became huge, and Finn wrapped his friend in a hug. C-3PO and R2-D2 were coming toward them. Did you hear that? C-3PO asked, looking toward the sky. That's a really cool comparison between the Rebellion and the Resistance. While the Rebellion was a small group of heroic freedom fighters who dared to fight back against an empire, this time an entire galaxy of people came together to stop the Emperor and First Order once and for all. This is a powerful theme of how the people, when they stand together against evil and tyranny, can make a positive difference and change the course of history. That's also why I love the moment when General Pride sees all of the Resistance ships first arriving and says, "Where did they get all this fighter craft? They have no navy." And the admiral next to him says, "It's not a navy, sir. It's just people." That is a great message. Also, I gotta point out how incredibly awesome C-3PO's final words are in the novel and movie. As Rey comes in for a landing in Luke's X-Wing, 3PO is standing next to R2-D2 as he looks up and says, "Did you hear that?" What an amazing text-to-text connection that goes all the way back to the very beginning of the Star Wars movies in 1977 in A New Hope. The first words ever spoken back then, first words in a Star Wars movie, come from C-3PO talking to R2 as the Empire is taking over the ship. And he says, "Did you hear that?"
Did you hear that? Did you hear that?
C-3PO, always played by awesome actor Anthony Daniels, who I have met more than once. He is a great guy. He gets to start and end his time in the Star Wars saga with the same words. That is so awesome. Now let's take a look at a scene that in the movie kind of confused a lot of people. Let's see if the novel handles it a little differently. In the last few pages of the book, Lando is talking with Jannah. "Where are you from, General?" came a voice at his shoulder, and Lando turned. It was Jannah, the kid from Kef Bir. "Gold system," he said. "What about you, kid?" "I don't know," she said, and her gaze turned distant. "I don't know." It hit him like a proton torpedo to the gut. He wasn't returning to Pasaana after all. Thousands, maybe millions of kids had been taken by the First Order, like his own little girl. And some of them, a very few, were special. The ones like Finn and Jannah, who had somehow managed to shake their First Order conditioning and make right choices. Lando and the Lady Luck would help these special kids find their families, if that's what they wanted. Help them discover their place in the new galaxy. Heck, maybe he'd find his daughter. Probably not, he knew the odds, but that would be a pretty good way to spend his twilight years, right? If the kids were amenable, anyway. "Well," he said to Jannah, "let's find out." The wondrous smile she gave him told him all he needed to know. In the movie version, this conversation was short and kind of odd, with people wondering if there's a connection somehow between Lando and Jannah. I thought maybe the movie was hinting that she could be Lando's missing daughter. However, the novel says Lando is being inspired by Jannah to stop hiding on Pasaana in his old age and stay involved and help make a positive difference by going out there and helping the kids who were taken by the First Order over the years, starting with Jannah herself. Perhaps he will work with both Jannah and Finn to do this, and he even thinks that he may find his own daughter someday. So, according to the novel, Jannah is making Lando think of his daughter and feel empathy for all the kids and their families hurt by the First Order. And that brings us to the last scene with Rey, Finn, and Poe together as they hug each other in celebration of the victory. This is page 244. It was all Rey could do not to burst into tears. Her friends, her family, they had all made it. Suddenly they were wrapped in a three-way hug. Rey felt the wetness of Finn's tears against her own cheeks, and Poe squeezed so tight it was hard to breathe. "Rey," Finn whispered, I've been meaning to tell you." "I know," she said, thinking of the way his presence had become so bright in her mind. "We all know," Poe said. A warmth flowed through them, a connection separate from the Force, and in its own way just as powerful. Rey didn't care to put a name to it. She only wanted to live in the moment and let it flow over her like water in the desert. There was so much work to do, dead to mourn, a galaxy to get up and running, but for now, the celebration continued all around them, and they kept right on hugging. One of my favorite reading techniques is inference, when you can guess what is happening without having it totally explained to you. I love how in this moment between these three friends, we, as the reader, can infer that they are talking about the fact that Finn also has a connection to the Force. They don't say it, but we can infer it. It's also a text-to-text connection back to Return of the Jedi, when Luke tells Leia that they are twins, and she says,
"No. Somehow, I've always known."
And now the time has come to read the final scene in the novel. Rey has come to Tatooine, back to the Lars homestead, where we first met Luke back in A New Hope. So many memories here. She could feel them, yearning, loss, worry, desperation, love. And not just Luke's. 2 generations of Skywalkers had visited this place. A cave-like entrance in the wall drew her forward. As she passed into shadow and her eyes adjusted, she noted a long dining table covered with dust. She ran a finger through the dust, tracing a line of soft blue. Luke had dined here, and also, she reached out, sensing, Anakin? An adjoining alcove contained some kind of beverage dispenser, but most of the levers and paneling had been scavenged, probably by the local Jawas. A single tall beverage cup made of plastex lay on its side, oddly pristine. Now let's skip ahead just a little to when Rey holds the lightsabers of Luke and Leia. Holding them side by side in her hand, she gazed down at them for a long moment. They belonged to her teachers, her family. She placed them on the ground, wrapped them gently into a small package, using some fabric and a leather tie. Calling on the power of the Force, she pushed, and the lightsabers sank lower and lower until the ground had fully welcomed them, shrouded them in cool, quiet rest. Rey stood, pulling out her own lightsaber. She ignited it. Her lightsaber glowed white gold, and she gazed at it a long moment. It was single-bladed, with an outer casing and emitter salvaged from her quarterstaff. The final result felt like the exact inverse of the lightsaber held by the dark Rey of her vision, and she loved it. It was beautiful, it fit so perfectly in her hand, and she would carry it with her forever. "Hello!" came a strange voice, and she turned. An old human woman approached, skin wrinkled and sand-blown, hood pulled up against the elements. She held the reins of a tall, gangly Itobi, probably on her way to the nearby trading post. "There's been no one for so long," she whispered. "Who are you?" "I'm Rey," she said. "Rey who?" the old woman asked. Light snagged Rey's gaze, and she turned her head. Leia and Luke stood on the edge of the homestead, glowing blue, smiling at her. Rey missed them both so much. Luke gave her a gentle nod. "It's yours, Rey." She turned back to the trader woman. Standing tall, she said, "Rey Skywalker." "Ah," the woman said, unsurprised. "See you around." And she hobbled off without sharing her own name. Rey Skywalker headed toward the Falcon to return to her family. People were precious. They were life and light. She couldn't have survived the Emperor, couldn't have resisted him, if not for the goodness and strength of her friends, and the generosity of the Jedi who had come before. And Ben, she reminded herself. As she approached, BB-8 warbled that he'd had enough of desert planets, but he gave no complaint when she paused to gaze into the vast desert morning. Together, Rey and BB-8 watched as Tatooine's twin suns rose on a new day. The end. I think it's really cool that while inside the Lars homestead, Rey senses not only Luke Skywalker, but also Anakin. She thinks about how 2 generations of Skywalkers were there, which is a connection not only to A New Hope with Luke, but to Attack of the Clones with Anakin. I also love Rey's lightsaber being white gold. It's a color similar to Ahsoka Tano's from the Clone Wars, when she takes her own path in life. Also, when fans saw the movie, they wondered if Rey's lightsaber was actually double-sided, especially since she fought with a staff over the years, but the novel says it's not. She did use her staff to create a single-bladed lightsaber, which she sees as the inverse or opposite of that fancy red double-bladed saber of the dark Rey that she saw in a vision. I also love the moment in the novel when the spirit of Luke Skywalker nods at Rey and gives her permission to carry on with the Skywalker name, saying, "It's yours, Rey." And when Rey says her name is Skywalker, it connects again to that main theme of Rey in these Star Wars stories, that a person can choose who they want to be and can form their own family rather than be controlled by some ridiculous bloodline theory. By the way, it's also awesome that the author lets us know Rey is not staying on Tatooine, and she is not alone. She is headed with BB-8 toward the Millennium Falcon, and they are flying back to their friends and their family. There's also a very meaningful theme at the end about people. Rey's thoughts as she prepares to head back to her chosen family are that people are life and light, which is also a metaphor. In other words, what life and goodness are all about is caring about people and the connection that we all have together. That's a powerful message in the Star Wars world and in our own world as well. I hope you have enjoyed reading together through some of these extra scenes and awesome moments in this book during our time in quarantine. I want to thank author Ray Carson for giving me permission to read these excerpts with you. I also want to thank Pablo Hidalgo and Phil Zostak, since I borrowed some words and images from their awesome Star Wars books too. It has been such an honor to share some Star Wars with all of you, and I've decided to continue a few more Jedi Guybrarian videos this summer. I will be discussing other Star Wars books you can read, plus I might mention some other new books for young people that I recommend. So I hope to see you again soon, and until then, may the Force and reading be with you, always.